My name's Agnes. I'm a toddler mom, but this account is about how I remembered I'm more than a mom. And this week I remembered I know how to DIY. And I DIY'd this headboard. I'm so proud of myself because it took our bedroom from this to this. I've been obsessed with this article headboard for years, but the price was not in the budget, so I DIY'd it for under $500 in 5 days. And I'm going to share how I did it. The caption below is going to have all the items linked that I purchased. Let's start by rewinding the tape and see how I got started. Before I bought a thing, I opened up ChatGPT to help me visualize what the headboard would look like and to choose the color of the headboard. Put in the prompt, and when this image popped up, I was sold on the green on green look. Next step was to plan, measure, and do some math. I measured the wall width and the height that I wanted the headboard to be at and took note of any outlets I needed to not cover. I figured out how many panels I wanted, 5 in my case, and calculated the width and the height that each panel would need to be. Day one of the DIY started with shopping at Home Depot, where I got a lot of the tools and these plywood panels where they cut them for free for me, as well as headed to the fabric store where I got the batting, the dust cover fabrics. I also ordered 2 queen size memory foam mattress toppers off Amazon, as this was the cheapest 3-inch foam I could find. I took a risk and ordered this olive green upholstery fabric online, but it turned out perfect. Now here's the first physical step to this DIY. You gotta cut the foam to fit each of the wood panels. I traced them with a Sharpie and then cut them with an X-Acto knife. A group of high school girls saw that I was filming this DIY and definitely laughed at me. Next, I used spray adhesive to attach the foam to the wood panels, making sure they lined up was the tough part, and I left these to dry. Day 2 of the DIY, it rained, so we started work inside the bedroom. The next layer was the batting. I measured and traced the batting to the size of the panels and gave a couple inches of extra room on each side to wrap around. The next day, when I laid out these batting pieces, I realized they were a little bit too big, but I cut off the excess. I was so excited to use this electric staple gun. This upholstery batting was so dense and thick, which is really great for the stability and plushness of the headboard, but oh my gosh, my hands hurt from stapling by the end. My best tip when upholstering is to start with a single staple at the top and the bottom and then the middle of each sides to stabilize the batting. Then I went around and pulled the batting tight as I stapled along, alternating on each side so it stretched evenly. Of course, the corners were the hardest part, but I've had a lot of practice with Christmas wrapping. I made a couple strategic folds and then stapled each of those in place before moving on to the next, and then I cut off the excess batting. Make sure you staple down as much of this batting as possible to keep it as flat from the back, because that'll impact the way it hangs off the wall. Now just keep wrapping 4 or 5 more panels. I promise you're going to get better with each panel, and this process does get easier. The corners become smoother. You get better as you go. Now, once you finish upholstering the batting, I do have a next optional step. I added a layer of a dust cover fabric. It's not totally necessary, but by adding this layer, it adds even more structure to each panel. And it means that in the future, I could change out that outer fabric if I wanted to without starting all over. You could use any thin fabric for this, but my fabric store had a specific dust cover fabric that I upholstered all 5 panels with. Like I said, this isn't a necessary step, but I'm really glad I did this. Day 4 was really exciting. It started off by attaching the hanging brackets to the back of each panel. These are called French cleat hangers, and they're rated for up to 100 pounds. The one part attaches to the back of the panel and the other to the wall, and then one just slides into the other to hold it up. Once those were attached, I got started on the final layer of fabric, which was this olive green velvet upholstery. At this point, I was an upholstery stapling pro, plus this upholstery fabric was much easier to wrap nicely. Here's a great example of how I folded the corners. I spent a lot of time folding the fabric, figuring out which way it wanted to lay before I stapled. Much easier with the upholstery fabric to do it. Because this is the last layer of fabric, it's important that it covers all the other layers and that it's folded and stapled really flat so it doesn't jut off the wall. This was the moment I knew I had smashed this DIY because of how great this one panel looked. Doing it again 4 more times was exhausting, but I was still very excited. Now, day 5 of this DIY was the final step of hanging the headboard panels. Of course, I recruited Tristan's help for that. Because we did 5 panels, we needed to start by marking the middle of the wall and hang that middle board first, then work our way out from there. Next, I marked 5 inches below
that middle of the wall top of the panel mark to align with where I had placed the hanging cleats on the back of each panel.
I loved this French cleat hanger system, but making sure it was level was tricky. Also, be careful with the spacing between each hanger because you want enough room for the panels to touch and not gape between. I highly recommend a laser level so each French cleat hanger is level with each other as well. That's the only way this headboard turned out level. After finding the studs and some more trial and error, we had each French cleat hanger attached on the wall. And now came the best part, which was putting each headboard panel on to each of the cleat hangers. And this felt like Christmas because I was starting to see my vision come to life and I was so excited. Getting the last headboard panel on was a little trickier, but after shifting, they all fit. And when I put my bed back together, it was so exciting to see how it looked and felt. I can't describe how nice it feels to have a fully finished bedroom. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. I hope you like the headboard. Comment below if you're gonna do it at your own home. And follow the account if you're on your own journey to becoming more than a mom and rediscovering the parts of ourselves that we get to rediscover in motherhood. So the links for everything that I use for the headboard are going to be in the description box below. I wish all of you the best on your journey to discovering who you are outside of motherhood and what lights up your souls. See you next week.